Welcome back, everyone, to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. And amicable meaning you can talk to one another throughout the settlement and the filing process, and neither of you feels the other is hiding significant assets. That's really all it takes. It doesn't mean you agree on everything. It just means you can talk. I'm Judy Weigel, your host, your amicable divorce expert. Why? Because that's all I do, amicable divorces. Today's podcast is about listening to your heart, not your friends and family. If I had a dime for every time somebody called and said, my friends got this in their settlement, my mother got this in their settlement, why can't I? Well, you can't because you aren't them. So here's what happens. You're getting a divorce. Either you were the one that initiated it or your spouse initiated it. But it's horrifying, regardless of who initiated it. You feel alone. You need help from anybody you can think of, right? You need comfort. You need to be right. But at the end of that first wave of trauma, when you've kind of processed as much as you can process about your life is changing, and this is huge, you need to stop. You need to organize your thoughts and your emotions. You need to get legal advice. Without a doubt, you need to get legal advice. You need to self-reflect in the most truthful way possible, with all the objectivity you can muster. Your part of the unraveling of the marriage. You need to forgive yourself. And unfortunately, you need to forgive your spouse. Well, fortunately, it means you'll do much better if you forgive your spouse. It sounds unfortunate because if you really do feel your spouse was the reason for the divorce, it's going to take a little while to process forgiveness. You need to dig down deep within yourself after you've gotten legal advice, after all of your friends and your family have told you what to do. You need to dig down and you need to see what a settlement feels and looks like. A settlement that you believe is appropriate for your particular marriage, for the tone of the marriage, for what transpired in the marriage. And you need to create a path forward for your life in order to go forward. So I organized some thoughts for you that I wanted to share so that you can at some point tune out the inevitable. And the inevitable are your family and your friends trying to help you. And they really think they're helping you by telling you what your settlement should be. And nobody can tell you what your settlement should be. Your settlement has to come from you. It has to come from what feels right, what sounds right. But it can't be ridiculous either. That's why I say you have to get legal advice. Even if you don't want to use lawyers for all of the filing and, pay a retainer for ongoing legal advice to have your attorney speak for your spouse, you still need to know what the law is in your state. And you need to know how the law applies to you and your assets, your debts, your children, custody, child support, spousal support. Every state is different. And you need to find out what your state says. And then you can do what we talk about in the family law community. You can work in what we call the shadow of the law. And that doesn't mean anything nefarious. It just means, okay, I've learned the law, and now I want to do a few things exactly the way the law says, but there's some other things that I just feel don't fit us. And if you two can get, you and your spouse, if you can get to that point where you say, okay, I understand what the law says, but this is what I think works better for us, you're going to have the best divorce humanly possible. So I just want to outline some things for you so that you can help yourself tune into you and craft the settlement that works for you and your spouse. So here's what naturally happens. You tell your friends and family you're getting a divorce. They feel horrible for you, and they want to suggest what you should ask for. Now, they want to suggest what you should ask for either to punish your spouse because they hate your spouse. They always have. Thank God you're getting a divorce. I can't believe it took you so long. What were you thinking of to get married in the first place? You know this happens, right? So they either want to tell you what to do to punish your spouse, or because they believe they understand divorce law well enough to guide you. But here's what they don't know. They don't know your marriage. They think they know your marriage because maybe they've interfaced with you for a while throughout your marriage, but they really don't know what happened behind closed doors. They don't know what you might have to apologize for. Because if Carrie Bradshaw on Sex and the City was right, we all have our silent secret selves. And we all do things in relationships that maybe only we know, things we might not want to talk about, but we keep silent and hidden. It comes out in the divorce. It eventually comes out in the divorce. So when your friends and family want to rally around you, you can listen initially, and then at a certain point you just have to say, thank you so much for your guidance. I think I need now to think about me and what I think is best for the divorce. If any of them don't like your spouse, they will really gin you up emotionally to the point of building a distorted version of your divorce story. And we all tell our divorce story, don't we? We have to have a divorce story. We have to create something that we can work within, a framework, so that we have a reference point, so that we have a foundation from which to work. However, they don't really know everything about your divorce story. They want to make your spouse wrong generally, and they want to tell you what you should do to destroy him or her in the divorce. These are the people you need to steer clear of. These are the people that are going to hurt you more than help you, because they're going to create a story that isn't you. You will then start believing this story in a way that reflects the new version of your divorce, the new you, the you your spouse doesn't know and therefore doesn't know how to react to, and starts mistrusting you because you're not you anymore. And a vicious cycle ensues that doesn't end well. It ends in way too many attorney's fees, and it could really end in court. So what you don't want to do is allow anyone to recreate your story for you. Your story is your story and your spouse's story, and it's nobody else's story. And don't let somebody do that to you. They're doing you an injustice, and it will never work. It will never work for self-healing, because you do have to heal. Even if you're the initiator of the divorce, you still have to heal at some point for whatever happened that got you married, that got you divorced. You still need to heal, and your spouse needs to heal. Even if your spouse was the one who initiated the divorce, your spouse needs to heal too. So honesty is the name of the game, and don't let anybody ever change that truthfulness that you need to get to in your divorce. Now, I'm not saying you should punish yourself. I don't think you should be responsible for things you don't need to be responsible for. But this is an opportunity for you to get clarity on who you are, what you've lived through, how you want to end this chapter, and how you want to move forward. So very important. So, how do we avoid unnecessary tragedy? with our friends and family part of this divorce? Well, you have to use friends and family, but you have to use them for emotional support and to provide to you things like get attorney's advice, please. Don't do this on your own. It's not a bad thing to get attorney's advice. See, people think they're being disloyal or sneaky if they see an attorney. You both need to see an attorney. It's the smart thing to do. And so if your friends and family are suggesting that you do that, do that. If your friends and family are suggesting you get therapy, maybe they're right. If your friends and family are suggesting some positive healing, some different activities you could get into just to offset the trauma and the sadness, do that. But do not listen to them tell you how to divide assets or what to ask for or that horrible word demand. Get that out of your vocabulary. But they want to tell you what to ask for spousal support, for child support, for asset division. Don't let them. This is not their divorce, and I'm going to keep stressing this all the time. This is your divorce, and your asset division is up to you, not them. Also, realize that advice can be based on unhealed wounds of the advice giver, or based on aspects of their divorce that don't exist in yours. If the advice giver has been through a divorce and is giving advice based on how they divided their assets, it's based on their circumstances. And they may not even be remembering everything correctly, and consequently giving you bad advice. Because here's what happens. People call me all the time after I get them divorced, and they're having a disagreement about something that was just easily ascertained if they would take out their settlement agreement and read it. Everybody works on this emotional plane, but if you bring the discussion down to logistics and reality, the way you should be making decisions should be in your settlement agreement. And we don't even remember how we got to our settlement agreement sometimes. We do the best we can to get through the divorce. We're kind of living in a dual reality, a split screen. We get up, we go to work, we feed the kids, we go to the activities, and then we have to make decisions about the divorce. And it's really quite overwhelming. So when it's all said and done, you've done the best you can. We don't even remember how we got to spousal support. How did that number come about? Child support. So really beware of your friends telling you, well, this is what I got, so you should be getting the same. Most people don't read their settlement agreements when divorce disagreements arise, so how can they give you the advice that's best for you? Plus, they make different amounts of money. Do they know what you both make? Settlement agreements for support are based on that. So I think you should just say thank you, take it in, put it on the side, and then talk to an attorney. Smartest way to do it. Also realize that all divorces aren't created equal. The reason for your divorce may not be the same reason as your friend's divorce. It's easy to compare your friend's settlement to the settlement you're in the process of negotiating. You have a lot of things. Are you going to get spousal support for life or for a limited amount of time? In California, it's based on the length of the marriage. Are you getting sole custody of the kids or are you sharing? More than half of everything, my favorite misstatement is that you can take your spouse to the cleaners. First of all, what a horrible phrase. I want to take you for everything. I want to take you to the cleaners. Well, the cleaners doesn't exist. The cleaners are out of business. And in a community property state, there's an equal division of assets and debts. Nobody gives up more than half unless they want to. So you can negotiate and you can provide reasons for that, but you can't have everything. Just because you're angry, you're not going to get everything. While it's nice to hear how other settlements look, you have to understand that the settlement was based on the specifics of someone else's financial statements and financial situation, the attorneys that they went to. If you have to go to court, the judge. Not all judges decide equally. Not all attorneys approach divorce equally. There's also the guilt that one or both spouses feel in a divorce. Believe me, the guilt that a spouse feels will positively affect the settlement for you if it's the other spouse that feels guilty. Take advantage of it, for heaven's sakes. You know, I sit in too many divorce mediations where the woman has to deal with the fact that the husband is in another relationship, and she wants to punish and punish and punish, and she doesn't even understand in a mediation that she's being offered a lot more than the law provides for, but she's not even hearing it. She's just into punishing, and she's lighting a match to her settlement. And that's what it's like when your family and friends want to punish your spouse. Believe me, they're handing you a book of matches, and you're gonna light fire to a settlement that may be wonderful for you because you're into punishing. And the priorities of each spouse and where they want to compromise are different. So not all divorces are created equal. You have to look at what's specific to your divorce different than theirs. So differences occur in these areas. Well, the people involved are different. Really. You're not the same as your friends. Your spouse's friends aren't the same as your spouse. And this affects everything. Does somebody have a personality disorder? That may affect the settlement big time. So the people involved start. You're not the same as the other people. Your settlement's not going to be the same. And the circumstances for the marriage ending are different, at least in the reasons why certain issues arose or events occurred. So circumstances for the marriage ending. Your circumstances could be different than your friends and your family's circumstances. But what if they're the same? Just what if they are the same? Did they transpire in the same way? Were they motivated in the same way? I mean, these things really matter. The individuality of the people involved really do matter. And then there's the communication of the couple. That's different. You know, this affects the tone of the divorce. It affects the welfare of the children. And it affects the amount of time it takes to complete the negotiations. You know, a lot of times people have to work on their communication first before they can even sit down and talk about the settlement. I start mediations, as do so many of my colleagues, and the couple's just not ready to talk. They're still hurting. They're still compartmentalizing. And so we have to stop the mediation. We have to just say, look, let's just do the best we can with what we can agree to now. And I think we need some space and time, but let me show you how to communicate. Let me show you how to ask for what you want. And then, unfortunately, it may be such horrible communication that unfortunately your attorneys have to talk for you, or you have to go in front of a judge because you're just so far gone from the ability to communicate, or at least one of you is. So that's a huge difference. And the emotional needs of the people involved are different. This affects mediation, and this affects negotiation overall. The emotional needs. I never was able to speak for myself. I always thought diminished. Now I'm ready to speak. Okay, that's great. Now your soon-to-be ex-spouse isn't used to you speaking. Now they've got to get used to you speaking up. They think you've completely changed. So there's whole emotional arc you have to go through that gets you to a point of being able to communicate. And then there's the ability to recover and lead an independent life. Oh, shoot. So my favorite example is you'll have a lot of women that are volunteering or have a minimal job at their children's school so that they can get, if it's a private school, a better rate for tuition. And that's fine when you're married. But when you're about to get divorced, and if the spousal and child support aren't enough because your spouse who's paying doesn't make enough money, you're going to have to look for another job. And that's kind of like the huge elephant in the room when we're doing mediations, to gingerly bring up the topic of, well, totally understand the reasons why you have this job at your child's school, but are you going to be able to survive? So the ability to recover and lead an independent life, it takes a little time, but that's what makes things different in your friends and family's divorces. There are the parental relationships to the children that are different. This affects custody in the co-parenting plan. Is anybody on drugs? Does anybody have a substance abuse issue? That could be different. Parental ideas about child rearing are different, and you have to talk about that, and that takes time to work out. You know, couples that are Orthodox Jewish, and, you know, the commitment to religion is huge. What if the other spouse never wanted to be that committed, but did it for the marriage? Now that has to be negotiated in order to get to a decent co-parenting plan. The length of the marriage is huge. It affects the asset and debt division. It affects spousal support. And then if there's another partner for one of the spouses, boy, that puts a backdrop to the negotiations that are really tough, because now the other spouse is trying to process the fact that there's somebody else in the picture, that other person may be whispering in your spouse's ear. So not only are you dealing with, I've got to accept this, there's another partner in the picture, you have to then get to the negotiation and make it your specific agreement and ask your partner to please tune out the voice in their head, in their ear. It's so hard. And then there's the forgiveness level between the spouses. Without forgiveness, it's just going to take longer if you don't want any regrets. When you can forgive each other, it just opens the door for the best negotiation you can possibly have. And I've spoken about this in other podcasts. There are books written on forgiveness. So very important. How do you handle your friends and family when they start giving advice? Friends and family should be with you, should surround you, and wrap their arms around you for emotional support only. Nobody, not even your closest confidant, can make decisions for you because that person wasn't part of the marital dialogue and the experiences that occurred with your spouse. Even with everything you've shared with them, it really is only one side of a two-sided relationship. And unless the other side has equal voice, no one's going to be able to give you appropriate advice. So engage your friends to learn about their mistakes when they were going through divorce. That can be helpful. And to understand how to go through a divorce making good decisions that will not only be right for you, but that will allow you to be proud of your behavior and learn how to save time and money. So If you want to talk to your friends about settlement, talk to your friends who had a good experience, as good as the experience can be, of course. That's what you should be focusing on if you really want to talk to your friends about, well, how did you get through this in a positive way? Those are your role models. That's who you want to talk to. Now, how do you listen to your heart? Well, the people who seem to negotiate a settlement that feels right to both spouses are quite frequently the couple who is self-aware enough to want to negotiate equal to their part in the marriage. It's rare, but it happens, and I feel really lucky that it happens in my office. I feel so lucky to have couples who teach me, that show me the work that they've done to prepare themselves for the divorce. And if you can scroll back to the very first podcast I did with Danielle Kugel, this woman was exemplary in having a great divorce and an amicable divorce. They worked on their communication skills before they came to me, and you could tell. They were generous with each other in terms of time. They were flexible. They were understanding, because even when you've gotten yourself to a point of being able to have an amicable divorce, you still have just bought a ticket to the emotional roller coaster. And it takes off when you least expect it. So we would be in the middle of doing disclosures, and I don't hear from one person. And then they have to make a decision about support or the house. I don't hear from them. I know that they're on the roller coaster, and as soon as the ride stops, I'll hear from them again. So go to the people who can teach you. And your family and friends may never agree with your decisions, but they don't have to agree, because it's not their marriage. It's yours. The divorce settlement will always reflect the tone of the marriage when done out of court in a mediation, or through attorneys as the voice of the parties if you need that. But tell your attorneys you want to go outside of the law a little bit. So your attorneys did a really good job teaching you the law. And now just say, look, I understand that, and thank you, attorney. I know you're doing your job. I know that you're wanting me to avail myself of the most the law can afford or provide, but that's not what I want. And so you have to manage your attorneys, by the way. You really have to, because not only do they want to do the best for you, they could be fighters. You got to tone that down a little bit when appropriate. And they also don't want, eventually, any kind of malpractice to be discussed. So, you know, I hate the phrase, I'm going to fight for you. I mean, why are we fighting? We're discussing. These words really have to change, but manage your attorney if you have to hire attorneys and you want a slightly different version to what the outcome can be. And when you negotiate from the heart, you're making the right decisions and the appropriate compromises. I stress the word appropriate. Don't cave. Make appropriate compromises. You'll feel it in your stomach. You'll feel that you're doing the right thing. You'll feel calm and settled. You'll have a positive gut feeling. Likewise, if you're not making the right decision, you'll feel that too. You'll feel uneasy and nervous. Now, you could feel nervous because you're not used to having a voice. I mean, a lot of people speak up for the first time in divorce. They've allowed their spouse to control them. Well, then take your time. Don't rush into making a decision just to make one. Really tell your spouse, this is what I think now, but I need a little time to process this. Just give me some time. Because there are spouses, and I had somebody in here today, Do they just want to rush through? We already talked about it. We already know what we want to do. She hired an attorney. I'm coming to you, Judy. You're not an attorney, but, I'm processing the response and some of the disclosure forms. But, I just want to get it done. I just want to get it done. Okay, believe me, you're going to spend a lot more in attorney's fees. You can't push people. If you talked about your settlement, great. It's not going anywhere. Yes, the fear that your spouse will be led down a different path with the attorney exists. But all you have to do is say, look, we talked about this. Why is this not okay? Why is what we talked about being changed? And I'm telling you, the phrase, well, I just want it to be fair, and I don't think it was fair. Well, fair is in the eye of the beholder. Yes, the law attempts to create fair. So if you want to say it feels better to go according to the law, that is a much better phrase to use, by the way, than I just want what's fair. Those are fighting words. Fair is a fighting word. Fair equals fight. Remember this. Fair equals fight. But if you want to say it just feels better to go according to the law, people can understand feelings. People can't agree on fair. And if you have difficulty speaking up for yourself and staying your ground when you become nervous in settlement discussions, then an attorney should be your guide in the negotiation. But let your attorney know how and why you want to be flexible with your spouse, because your attorney only knows the law. Your attorney is there to see that the law is adhered to. But your attorney doesn't know how you really think and feel about how you want to take advantage of what the law has to offer and not. So you really have to talk to your attorney about your divorce, about your part in the divorce, about how choosing different compromises in a settlement will make you feel better. That's your way of giving back. Maybe you were the one that created a bad marriage. And your way of giving back is saying, look, I'm really, really sorry. I know I was the culprit. I know I can't change the past, but I really just want to help you out for the future. And this is how I want to do it. And if you have an attorney representing you, you just got to tell that to your attorney and say, no, this divorce settlement is mine. And I need you to do what I want you to do. And that's where your heart is going to be satisfied. And that's how you're going to listen to your heart. So lastly, your heart and the law. Getting legal counsel before negotiating is absolutely imperative so that you know where to go, so that you can venture away from it. You need a starting point, and the starting point is the law, and then you can move forward in the way that works for you. Once people understand the divorce laws of their state, they may negotiate differently than the law by mutual consent. So start with the law and then go to your heart. The law is there to put a framework and a starting point to a marital settlement agreement if the couple is not able to negotiate. And maybe you have to go to the law. That's fine. Maybe what you would like to do for your spouse isn't enough. Maybe you can't do what your spouse wants you to do, and then you just have to stick to the law as much as possible. If the couple can't agree to accept the law as their defining point, then the court and the judge are there to end the negotiation with a ruling. In the cases of assets and debts, the judge has to work within the framework of the law. With custody, a little bit more room to rule. The law can be fuzzy and gray, but the law is never emotional. So, to recap, learn the law, and once you learn the law, learn your heart. Self-reflect and look at your part in the transition of the marriage. Look at your part in the marriage so that you can transition properly out of the marriage. Forgive yourself and forgive your spouse for not continuing in the marriage. Ask for what you would like in the settlement terms that comport with the tone of the marriage, but realize if you're asking for way too much and you're positioning your spouse to live on nothing, okay, that's not going to happen. You do have to have a reality about this as well. Well, I just want everything. No, you can't have everything. So learn the law, and then if you want to go above what the law provides, explain why. And lastly, make sure your gut feels good about the overall settlement, not just what you receive, but what you're giving. It is a two-way street. And what you give has to comport with what you're getting, and it has to all make sense with the tone of your marriage. So listen to your heart. That's the most important thing. Use your family and friends for emotional support. Let your family and friends guide you in terms of legal support and therapeutic support. But the settlement has to be yours. So, thank you again for joining me. I hope this helped. My name is Judy Weigel. I'm your amicable divorce expert. My company is Divorce Resource Incorporated in Los Angeles. I'm a divorce mediator and a legal document assistant, which means I file for amicable divorces. And if there are any topics you want me to discuss, please feel free to email me at Judy, Judy, at divorceresourceinc.com. Judy, Judy, at divorceresourceinc.com.